Time for another draft physics video presentation. Okay, enough of an intro. Probably gravity and then some more light stuff, no doubt. Comments and, try to be patient and whatnot. It's just tedious. Anyway, I'm not really qualified to debate any of these topics. Retired graphic artist, minimal physics, math education. So it really doesn't matter about your education, frankly. It just matters about your exposure, what you've spent your free time doing. And because obviously I don't have any formal education beyond high school, but I don't really see it as an obstacle if you've spent your free time, getting yourself electrocuted, in a sense, well, it doesn't matter. It's a useless argument. People think badges make a difference in the world, and I would argue they really don't make any difference. But anyway. But after discovering your channel a few days ago, I have so many more questions about all the seemingly magical ideas I've previously been taught about the universe. Yes, probably taught by documentaries and other kinds of crap that, they spew as a version of reality. A description, and frankly, it might as well be just preachers giving you a sermon full of their own selected metaphors from the Bible, stories. So they just tell you some stories, and the stories don't have to be true. They can tell you about experiments they never did and all kinds of crap like that. Anyway, have you done a video about Einstein's view of gravity? Well, not directly, but I mean, obviously the video I just did on the subject of gravity is a description of the right answer as opposed to that wrong answer. But anyway, and I pointed out how curved space doesn't mean anything. Bent space, curved space, 3 dimensions don't do that. So it just doesn't mean anything. It's an unsuitable analogy. To use words you can only use in 2 dimensions in 3 dimensions. That's unsuitable. That's breaking the rules, so to speak. So as an idea, it doesn't mean anything, because converting it into 3 dimensions doesn't have anything to do with bending. It has to do with a convergence. Or as Susskind would say, an anti-divergence, because they play little word games, because they don't want to concede that their gravity just means it's a vacuum cleaner. Alright, and the point is what's creating the vacuum. Alright, and how it relates to current search for a graviton. Now, the word graviton, as I have pointed out in much past videos, just isn't a word. I'd like to be able to use the word, because it does describe the reality. The reality is a ton. The reality is that momentum is quantized. It is in little clumps flying through the universe. And it'd be nice to be able to use that word, but can't use it. Can't use it because they've destroyed it. Because they're talking, when they say graviton, they don't mean what it sounds like an electron or like something with momentum. They're talking about some magical glue-on-y thing, where it bangs into you and it makes you move forward. A magic bullet that hits you and the bullet makes you move towards somebody. So their notion of a graviton is insipid. I mean, it doesn't, it breaks all the frickin' rational analogistic rules, because we don't have anything to analogize it to. It doesn't mean anything. It's a word. It's just broken because it just destroys the whole concept of understanding gravity. Anyway, is gravity simply an effect of curved space? Well, clearly not. Curved space is silly, frankly. It just, again, you can't, space is 3-dimensional. You can't curve 3 dimensions. It just doesn't make any sense. So why are we playing with a stupid concept? The idea is, as I've analogized it, is to thinking like a light bulb in reverse. Something's not producing energy. Somehow it's consuming energy. And by consuming it, absorbing it, that's, I mean, you feel the effect in the atmosphere. So I guess I might as well start at this point. Alright, so what I would prefer you do is just to think about it some sort of logical way and understand the difference between the two kinds of thing in the universe, energy and matter. And so the simple argument is this stuff you might want to call a graviton or a photon or anything is made out of a little quanta of a bit, okay, a qubit, we could even steal their language, of momentum. It's a little thing, it moves the speed of light through the universe, and when it interacts, matter is like just it doesn't have any, you could say all mass is doesn't really have mass. You don't have mass till you absorb energy, and so mass is just well, it doesn't matter, but yes, matter, okay, the things that all matter, okay, so I guess I should just make it clear, it's just, okay, electrons and protons, okay, you can see that, yes, well, almost, you can almost see that, almost see it. This fucking camera is a pain in the ass. Gotta find a better way to position it. Alright, so electrons and protons are that's all there is. And so all you have in the universe is electrons and protons, and they're getting hit by little quanta of energy. So there's a field of energy, these little bits moving the speed of light. And the little bits can be in a frequency, and then we call it a photon. But the regular little bits, the ones doing most of the stuff, aren't in this configuration where there is specific frequency. So there's a ton of it that isn't playing along with the frequency rules. And the frequency rules have a definitely length rules. So understand that a photon, this is not a photon. Okay, 2 little quanta at the right frequency, not a photon. 3, still not a photon. 4, still not a photon, as we would know it. It's only a photon if there's 6 of them for us, as far as we're concerned. So let's understand the energy exists in forms that we don't see. We don't even detect. Our detectors can't even detect the frequency because its ray length isn't long enough. So anyway, so there's a ton of that stuff, and I could call it the cosmic background radiation. I could cite a lot of things. And so that external pressure is what's creating the light bulb effect. So you could understand that the light bulb, okay, is it, you know, you can think of this thing as being something that has gravity. You can think of it as, you know, like I said, like, okay, it's a source, it's producing something, right, like a light bulb. Or you can think of it exactly the opposite, as it's a little drain with a million little holes in it, and it's basically absorbing something from the universe, that the pressure is on the outside, essentially. And that would be the way to analogize it. Now, no analogy should be taken too seriously, right? It should always be understand that it looks like doesn't mean it is like. And so you don't necessarily jump to too many conclusions that it's the same thing. And that's what they did, in that they saw something that has a frequency, and because waves have a frequency, therefore the thing with a frequency is a wave. You don't jump to those silly conclusions. Alright, so the simple idea is that the matter, when you hit it, it doesn't immediately move at the same speed as the little bit that hits it. So a little bit hits the matter, okay, the electron or the proton, and it moves it slower than the bit was going. So in a sense, the bit, you know, has had its meaning changed. It's been altered in its destiny. It would have been here because it hit this thing. It won't be here. It's stuck here. The energy, the momentum is here instead of here. So obviously something over here, right, this piece of matter, isn't going to get hit by this if it hits this first. You can sort of get the simplicity of that. And if everything else is balanced, okay, this is called mock gravity, by the way. It does have a name. They do use it when they're teaching Einstein's physics because it models it so well. It creates this convergence very well. So you just create an external pressure with these things going in all kinds of directions, right? So this bit could be going this way, this way, this way, this way. So you just have a field full of energy, And it ends up being equal on both sides of these things. And what makes it unequal is when they start to move. Because when they're moving, that means they're absorbing it. That means it's stuck for a while. And it's doing this 22 miles an hour, okay, instead of doing 3 million miles an hour, or 3 million meters per second. Instead of doing 3 million meters per second, it's doing this thing really slow. So it's not going where it was going. And it's going to keep going this way until enough force hits it this way to stop it. So it's always got to be balanced by an equal amount of getting hit. So if something's moving, it means it got hit by more stuff in the opposite direction it's moving. And the truth is it absorbed that stuff and it's created a lack of stuff. So we could just make these little X's here. There's stuff that was supposed to be going this way and it isn't going that way. And now this thing over here is going to say, where's the stuff that's supposed to be hitting me? Okay, it's not hitting me, so now this pressure, these hits are going to mean something now because they're not going to be balanced by this equal and opposite field is not getting to it because it's been absorbed moving something. So, stop that, you stupid motherfucking piece of crap cable. Anyway, I will get angry at you. There will be repercussions. You will be killed. Alright, anyway. You do have to bargain with electronics now and then. Yeah, it's an analogy. Don't take it too seriously. Anyway, so if this is moving, that means it absorbed energy to do it in the sense that it's occupying energy. Energy has been used to make it move, and in using that energy to make it move and not having the equal and opposite reaction to set it free again to cause the reflection so it goes back where it's supposed to be. That's the simple reason why as soon as something's moving, it's creating gravity. And so inside of big objects like the Earth, there's stuff moving in all directions, all over the place moving. And all that stuff moving, okay, jiggling, because it's jiggling because of these interactions are constantly happening. And from any viewpoint, okay, looking at it from this side, I'm going to see all the stuff that has a component in this direction. So the stuff going this way and the stuff going this way. In a sense, I'm going to see the fact that that's going to absorb energy in one of these directions, okay, to make that movement. And I can see that because it changes my world. But the stuff that's moving this way, the matter, the little atoms in here and the little electrons and the protons that are going this way, I can't see what happens to them. It won't affect me, all right, in a direct, obvious way. I mean, obviously there's this idea that everything is reflecting the universe around it. Everything's, stuff is hitting and stuff is reflecting off and stuff is hitting and stuff is reflecting off. So it's constantly reflecting the world, okay? But that's a two-way trip. Right, to see that reflection takes twice as long. So I'm obviously going to see the stuff absorbing energy towards me. That's going to be, obviously it doesn't get to me, and that's a straight line, right? From here to me is a straight line. But for me to see the change in something moving away from me, I have to reflect the energy off of it and then come back to me. So it's a longer trip, so to speak, before I know about its movement. And obviously it's moving away, which means it's not going to get hit as soon as it would have. So if it was staying here, I'd get a reflection in a certain amount of time. But if it moves to this position, it's going to take longer for the reflection to get to me. So that's the key point to make. And so I'm going to know about that much later than I know about the other movement. So those little imbalances created by perspective means that every movement is creating gravity. So every time something's moving, you just have to understand that it's changed the speed at which the force is getting through the universe. By hitting matter, a piece of force slows down for a while. That's the simple way to look at it. So just ignore the existence of the matter and just think about the force. And so the force changes what it is when it interacts with the magical matter, and it's now moving much, much slower. Okay, and that sort of is all you need to do. That's the only metaphorical way you need to understand the dynamic, is that it's just a matter of things aren't going to get where they're going because they're going much slower when they're going inside of a piece of matter. Now obviously when this matter arrives at the surface of this piece of matter, it's still holding all of that force, whatever force has been pushing it all along all this time. And so it's going to hit here, and the energy, the old speed is going to be given back, okay, as smashing in, a tremendous amount of energy because all the old speed has essentially just been trapped. It hasn't been lost, it's just been trapped. It's just been going in circles. It's still there, just hasn't been released. Alright, let's see if there's some other more careful way I can say this. Just trying to give you the simple version of it. And that's, I think that's all I can do. See, it's not like normal kinetics where you think of a little ball of something hits a big ball of something. The little ball stops moving, the big ball moves, or rolls. It's this, you can use that kind of analogy. I mean, it's sort of obeying that rule if you understand that the little ball is essentially inside the big ball making it move. So as long as you understand, matter doesn't move unless it's absorbed more energy in one direction than it did in another direction. So it had to get hit by more in one direction than another direction. The Earth is moving around the sun. Its original velocity to do that came from somewhere. It didn't just magically show up. It had to pre-exist, okay? Because you can't just fall into an orbit. You have to be injected into an orbit, and then your speed has to be slowed down. Well, yeah, see, every subject is a little bit nuanced, so there's no way to make it too simple. But anyway, all right, so back to bent space. So bent space is just such a, it's almost a trivial thing, I mean, it's so understating anything. The key thing Newton discovered was the R² rule. And that's what the light bulb is doing. And that, this is, it's just this simple argument that if you think of something as a point source and you understand that whatever, even if it's only producing one ray every second, if you understand that the rays come in all directions, that is, it could come out any one of those directions, you would understand that over time it sends a certain amount of energy out into the universe, and that these lines are constantly separating because they all came from one place. And so then you have this inverse square, just means that all you're saying is it's separating in two dimensions. So when the rays go out, they're spreading not only in this dimension, but they're also spreading in this dimension. So the force gets weaker and weaker by this rule. And that's all the bent space is saying, is let's take that rule and draw a picture of it. And this would be the picture of it. And now if you took it to this, the problem is that they turn everything into a mathematical model, and the math doesn't know that it can't do this infinite thing. That these have real sizes, there's only so close you can get the electrons and the protons together. Unless you understand all of that somehow in the math can do this silly thing. It can create this infinite line, an infinitely deep well. And there really isn't an infinitely deep well because the force is coming from the external universe. And it only has so much density. So like the light bulb can only produce so much light, the universe is only creating so much external pressure. And the amount of external pressure dictates limits to how far down this well you can go. Because you only have so much pressure, and all you're really doing is absorbing the pressure, finding something to block it, and you're just saying, if I shield all the pressure, what do I have? Well, yeah, you have a zero, but the zero has a limitation. It doesn't, there's a zero. There's not an infinitely gradual, you can only have a zero amount, I don't know how else to say it. and that's a certain amount of pressure. So whatever this pressure is, you could say it's 10 million pounds per, square millimeter. So it's 10 million pounds per square millimeter of force. And that's all there is. There isn't any more. So once you've blocked the 10 million pounds, okay, per square millimeter, that's it. You're all done. You can't make any more pressure. All right. Let's see. Yeah, so that's enough of that. I mean, it's physics. You can't make it too simple. I'm just saying bent space doesn't say anything. The whole key is this idea of bent space-time, like somehow space and time are connected. And that gets into a whole nother realm of minutia, just because it doesn't really matter for the real universe, because the way they've engineered the effects of the time dilation, it only matters when you get into subnuclear particles moving near the speed of light. It has no consequence on regular sized objects moving regular speeds. So it doesn't really mean anything, and you can't really test it, because you really can't move a spaceship half the speed of light and watch the light being bent. And you can't do any of these experiments that would prove it one way or the other. But I would argue, yes, there's no correlation between space and time. Time is just a function in 3 dimensions. Time just exists because there's a speed of light. That's it. If force could move instantaneously through the universe, there wouldn't be any time, because everything would happen instantaneously. And it's because the force has a limited speed is why there's time. And time is completely dependent on how far in space a piece of energy moves, and you can't make it move any faster. There's no superluminal. There's no faster than energy. No, the bits of energy is the only speed you got. It's the maximum and the only and the foundational and the elemental speed. It's the speed that everything else is some derivative of. You slow the force down by hitting matter, and then you go some other speed. But there's no other speed until you hit a piece of matter that moves slower. And that's it. Have you done any video about Einstein's view of gravity, curved space, and how it relates to the current search for graviton? Right, so graviton is, it'd be nice if I could say graviton and it would be consistently understood as a pushing force, but they're going to turn into a pulliton. That's what their graviton is. It's a pulliton, and there's no pull in the universe. That's another simple statement I've been making for years. It's a push universe. The force is on the outside. Okay, and the vacuums, so to speak, are on the inside. That's the way it's the pressure is always pushing. Nothing ever pulls on anything. There's no pull mechanism. And the push mechanism is just the idea that this little quanta stuff moving the speed of light hits the slow matter stuff. That's it. That's the only interaction in the universe, is energy hitting matter. That's it. There's no other interaction. All right. Or does it emanate? Wait, here we go. Graviton. Is gravity simply an effect of curved space? Well, obviously, curved space is nothing. It's not a force. It's not real. It doesn't mean anything. So yes, that's mush. There's no curved space moving anything. Nothing doesn't tell something what to do. The force tells it what to do. The pressure on the outside of the universe, everywhere in the universe, constantly bombarding everything, is what's forcing everything into little balls. It's being pushed into little balls, not pulled into them. Or does it emanate from some sort of particle or field? Well, I don't know how I did have the video just a few days ago called Gravity. Obviously it's a field, but it's not a field like a force field, like they describe fields as being something like the electric field or the magnetic field. There's no field until you have soldiers. So if you want to send out a bunch of soldiers and then say you have a field of soldiers, it's okay with me. But there's no pre-existing field like a field of corn, and then you make the corn vibrate or something. You know, you blow wind over the corn. That's not what energy is. Energy is real little soldiers, real little bits of quanta that are permanent in the universe. They never die. They never give up. They never quit. They just go, 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 go. So the force in the universe has been forcing all kinds of things for all kinds of billions of years. I am totally confused about whether it's supposed to be one or the other or both. Yeah, I don't know the confusion. Frankly, the two are so different. The whole idea of a mechanical system versus a space that says so. So the whole idea of fields is it's such a broken word because they don't put anything real in the field. They say the field is in a condition that somehow the domino is up or the domino is down. There's no dominoes. The dominoes are moving constantly in the universe. All right, they don't stationary ever. Okay, and you know, all you can do is have one stick to a piece of matter for a bit of time, and in doing so, it'll move slower than domino speed. Alright, thanks again for providing a resource for learning this stuff without all that mystical mumbo jumbo that seems designed more to confuse than to educate. Well, unfortunately, I don't think it's designed to do that. It's designed because it's a sad commentary on the state of intelligence on planet Earth, in that even the people who think they're atheist and they're above being silly and fabulistic and storytellers of, you know, just bullshit, you know, aggrandized, you know, human-centric, hyperbolic, paint me a unicorn kind of crap. And clearly science is full of people who are religious at their core. They've rejected the meanie and bully gods of Mohammed and Jeebus, you know, the thunder, Thory kind of gods, and they've accepted some little fairy, you know, prancy little tiptoe through the tulip bullshit god. They clearly, as biologists, haven't taken evolution at all seriously, and as physicists, they clearly are just seeking, you know, magical answers to questions. They want the answers to be interesting, like, because humans deserve an interesting story. They don't want to be part of a book called, you know, Darth Vader Run, Darth Vader Run. You know, bug. They don't want to be think. They don't want to think of themselves as, oh yeah, we're just bugs on a planet. And they don't want to think about the universe as being this drony, mechanical, fixed, deterministic, brutal, dumbass, circumstantial, deserve has nothing to do with it bullshit universe. They don't want that. They don't want the truth. And that's what it's out of. They're not trying to confuse you. They're desperately trying to force an easy to understand simple system of energy and matter, and they're trying to turn that into a magical story of wonder. La 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 la. They're trying to make it mystical and shamanistic to say, yes, our life has purpose because we're going to the golden singularity. So, you know, it's just the same shiny city on the hill bullshit that they've been wrapping nonsense in for as long as humans have been walking the planet. We still haven't grown up enough to say there's the right answer isn't going to look like religion. They still haven't figured that out. Anyway, confuse and then educate. Apologies in advance for some of the painfully stupid questions I might ask in the future. Yeah, well, some of that can be avoided. I mean, look, the videos I've made in the last month are pretty solid. I've tied up a lot of loose ends in the last month. So any of the videos I've made in the last month are good videos, and you probably should watch them. And then you'll get the idea, I would imagine. Alright, he's done all, just dig more into his channel. Yes. So then superior mind answers him, and and usually, as it goes with superior mind, it's a good answer, but it's not really it's not how I would say it. So I'll just go through some of it just to correct any confusions we have in how we say things. So curved space is a gimmick. Curving nothing is illogical. So yes, it's a totally agreeable statement. I mean, it's such a non-answer. I mean, I call it vacuous in the sense that it's not an answer to the question of what gravity is. Okay, to say some invisible thing is bent is just a bullshit answer. It's not mechanical. It's not. They can't draw it in 3 dimensions. It's just a nonsense. All right. Gravitons are essentially photons. See, this is the dangerous part, because no, they're essentially virtual photons. So gravitons are their effort to create what they have in quantum mechanics. In quantum mechanics, they have this magical, virtual photon that's responsible for the inverse effects of attraction and repulsion. So in quantum mechanics, they use the word virtual photon to describe some imaginary force carrier, some quanta of energy that somehow, when it hits a proton, okay, it says move towards me, right? And when it hits an electron, it says move away from me, okay? So the same bit somehow creates these 2 interactions, and they know that part. They figured that much out, that something moving the speed of light that looks like one of these tons is somehow causing these 2 effects. But because they didn't really think through it, they don't know. They're trying to make the same object do that, and it can't do it. So that's why you have to understand there's 2 varieties of the force. One that causes reflection, one that causes reflection with the proton. So yeah, it's the only real solution to the problem. But anyway, so the virtual photon has this capacity to create these 2 interactions. And so they're doing the same thing to the graviton. They're just saying, okay, we'll create a particle that when it leaves one object and goes to the other object as the carrier of this magical force, the object actually gets hit by it and moves towards, which doesn't make sense at all. So, I mean, it's not like a photon at all, because photons never do that, right? Photons always impose energy. All right. A force bit. Okay, it's essentially photons. Fewer force bits than actual photon. See, I don't know what that actually means. A graviton, I don't think, would be a series of bits at a frequency, so it really wouldn't be the same at all. And to say it had fewer force bits, gravity isn't fewer, it's more. So whatever. Which do have a frequency, which do not have a frequency. So again, they don't have to be in array form then. They don't have to be any of that stuff, frankly. Are effective ray length. They're bits. Yes, coming just coming at you. Yes, and they can incidentally have a frequency now and then, but they'll rarely get up to having 6 bits at the right frequency. But there are probably some spontaneous, some photons that are created not by the usual atomic mechanisms, but merely because a bunch of energy converged at a point in the right sequence. We can segregate the 2 types of graviton, so which are responsible for charge through aligning the electron and protons as strings of dipole configurations in a magnet. Well, boy, I'd never use the word strings. That's dangerous. But yeah, that's not how I'd say it. There's clearly 2 + 2 + 2 physics is what I'm arguing. So the simple solution to the problem is there's 2 kinds of energy and 2 kinds of force and 2 kinds of force energy, right? Alright, so this one's electron force and proton force, and there's two kinds of matter. There's the electron, okay, we'll put an X through him, and the proton. So, and there's two kinds of interaction, in the sense that if an X force hits an O object, okay, the X force leaves perpendicularly, and the momentum is this way. And if the X force hits a X object, alright, then the X object has the momentum in the direction of the force, and the force reflects. Eventually, when it hits another object, of course, it has to have the equal and opposite reaction, the drag reaction. So until the drag shows up, it doesn't reflect until the drag shows up, but it's inevitably going to reflect in the universe, in the known universe. Sooner or later, yeah, it's going to happen. So that's all you have. You have two interactions, two kinds of matter, and two kinds of force. And that's all you need. 2 plus 2 plus 2 physics. Alright, so maybe I won't read this. Yeah, because maybe it's just going to cause more confusion. Let's see. Strings configuration. Okay, electrons reflect one type of photon force, and the protons reflect the other type. So again, it's not a photon. An electron never interacts with a whole photon. A whole photon never hits a single electron. All the electron can do is interact with one piece of a photon, one tiny piece. Photons spread over a huge polarization. Electrons are tiny, tiny things. Just there's no possibility for one electron to absorb an entire photon or to produce an entire photon. It has to be something an atom does. Alright, magnets, type 1, blah, 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 blah. When the arrangements are not aligned, the reflections are scattered. So that's really dangerous too. The scatter is always by rules. So there's never a random bit to the scatter. So the scatter is always by some logic that the electron is always moving in some direction. It's always attached between the pressure, repulsive pressure, created by having the same objects, ping pong paddle argument, piece of force bouncing back and forth, the pressure. Anyway, been through it so many times. Anyway, are not aligned. Most of the time, the converging forces from the universe around each atom will balance out, cancel. They always cancel. It's just the point is if you have matter, the cancellation takes time. So, the Earth is storing energy by moving through space. It has a bunch of stored energy in the sense that it has a velocity through space. It's moving. And by moving, it means it has to constantly be getting hit by more energy going one way than going the other way to keep moving. And so it's when it does finally hit something, you'll see a lot of energy. Alright, when the arrangements are not aligned, the reflections are scattered. Most of the time, the converging forces from the universe around each atom will balance out. Okay, but act to hold the atom together. Well, there's just an external pressure, ultimately, and the atom is held together by that external pressure. Obviously, the electrons and protons balance each other in their inverse reactions to the two opposite forces. Alright, the neutron is a tightly paired electron and edit proton with the intermediary allowing the other proton to get really close. Yeah, so now he's describing nucleus. See, you don't need all this to do gravity. Gravity, you don't have to think about the two forces because they are completely undo each other in their inverse reactions. So you could just take all their actions out of it and just recognize that any motion by a material object means it has absorbed more energy going this way than the way of its motion than it did in the opposite way. And that's always true. And that's the only thing you need to understand that it's really going to be easy for you to see a shadow. If somebody blocks the light bulb, puts something in the way, the shadow's obvious. The shadow being cast on the other side, right? That's not so obvious. I can't see that. I can't see where on the other side of the light bulb there's a shadow. So that's not going to affect me. Whatever it's doing to the rest of the universe isn't going to affect me. The only thing that affects me is that obvious shadow. And that shadow means there's an absence of force hitting me, and that absence of force means the pressure, the light on the other side. Oh, that's the way to understand all this, right? I mean, I should just made it that simple. I've done this before. Just think of the universe, okay, the big black part, just invert the universe. So take the stars and make the stars black and make the black light. And then just think of it as little black objects in a sea of light. And then understand that when a black object gets closer to you, it's going to block more of the universe's light. The light is coming from the way outside somewhere, a big round dome, and it's just shining. And anything that is in proximity to you, depending on how close it is going to block more and more of the light. And that's all you need to think about. So the light is constantly trying to get to you from the universe, and there's all this matter in the way blocking it. So even you could think about the atmosphere and the sun. I mean, just think of it the inverse way. You really can't. I mean, the atmosphere is a whole another complication, so I don't want to get in there. Yeah, so just think of it as little objects that don't themselves radiate anything. They can just block light. And if you do that, you can understand what gravity is. That if you have more stuff on one side of you blocking the light than there is stuff on the other side of you blocking the light, and the stuff on this side is closer, that you're going to move in that direction because you're getting hit with more light from that side. Alright, anyway. So he's going on to the neutron stuff. Yes, neutrons are just electrons and protons. They allow protons to get closer to each other, blah, blah, blah. With the intermediate allowing the photon to get really close, the proton. The electrons are held in configuration to maximize equilibrium. Yeah, well, that sounds a little bit, Atoms delay the energy. That's all you need to know. Atoms delay the energy between each other by changing the distance each force bit must travel. By moving in space, yes, they are absorbing energy, and they don't move the speed of light, and therefore the force is now moving slower. It's progressing slower through the universe, and that means it's a shadow for some period of time. This delay creates an absence of force between each mass relative to the energy coming from the universe around them. Okay, maybe. It's like pressure. Yes, that's it. It's like pressure. So if you think of light being like pressure, and you think of the universe as being lit, you can sort of get it. But basically there aren't a bunch of different fields. Yes, there's no fields. There's only a bunch of soldiers. That's it. You either send them or you don't send them. They're either there marching or they're not. But there's no such thing as a field of soldiers just standing around. They're either attacking a target or they don't exist. Basically just different configurations of the two force types. I can elaborate more for anything that isn't apparently clear, adequately clear. Yeah. The idea, I think, is to try to simplify it. But whatever. Keep trying. It's good to try. Alright, so I think we already did this. What formal education in physics, PhD? If yes, in what field? Obviously my knowledge has been acquired out of formal institutions. I've clearly watched a ton of physics lectures that are free and available online, and I've done plenty of that in the last 7 years. But yes, to tell you the truth, you learn more by finding the actual experiments and then going through the experiment to try to detail what is really happening when they say something does something. Like they say a piece of glass is a beam splitter, you know, a mirrored piece of glass, and it's way too complicated to be just saying, oh yeah, it splits it into two equal beams. You know, you can figure out theoretically they can't be equal beams. Anyway, so Jerry, who I gave him a simple challenge and he completely failed, unfortunately, so he's got to go. Your question was, why is there no diffraction pattern? No, that's a lie. That's not what I asked. I asked a simple question. Okay, you keep bringing up Huygens. I said Huygens creates two waves in the single slit. Why aren't there four waves in the double slit? You know, I'll show you possible answers you could have come up with. You know, but I mean, I drew it for you even. Okay, Huygens says two waves come out of a single slit. Well, how can you use this principle rationally and then not have four waves coming out of the double slit, right? So this wasn't tough at all right? And here you are dodging again. You're playing these fucking games as if I didn't ask a direct, simple question. You keep saying Huygens is the answer. Huygens, whatever. Huygens knew the truth. Well, Huygens doesn't even explain why there's two fucking waves here, jackass. Okay, I pointed that out. I drew the picture. I said, look, it makes a lot of little waves on the flat wave. You still haven't explained why this bulge in the wave is happening at all in the first place. In water, we know the explanation. It's fucking friction. Did you apply any information explaining any of this shit? No, you just, again, evaded the fucking goddamn question. But I asked you a simple fucking question, shithead. Two waves. Why aren't there four here? Why did Young draw it like this when we know there has to be two waves there? Why did he draw this when we know there has to be two waves there? Because the Huygens principle fucking says so. And you can't sit there and have a fucking principle that you change the fucking rules depending on the experiment. That's not the definition of a fucking principle, for fucking sake. So, I mean, this wasn't complicated. I didn't ask that much from you. And so you could have said, okay, it does create four waves in the double slit. Okay? You could have just answered correctly and said, oh, yeah, well, the real math says there is four waves here. Okay? But the problem is your four waves are in the wrong places, so it doesn't work. I mean, your 4-point sources. Your 4-point sources end up being the surfaces. And that's what the math indicates. The math says these are your sources. Okay? And the math says quite explicitly that the interesting part of these four sources is that these two sources create the envelope pattern, and these two sources, the outside longer distances, and there always has to be this relationship. You can never make the outside surfaces closer, right, than the inside surface, right? This surface has to be, always is the smaller distance. This is always d less, and this is always d more, right? There's no other way to look at it. These two surfaces always have to be further apart than these two surfaces. So we know, in essence, the truth is that yes, I can make this envelope really, really big so you'll never see it, and then all the pattern will be inside of it. But the truth is it's always there. The two inside and the two outside. And so the simple truth is there is no, these aren't waves here. Waves don't go over the half the surface and then into the object. These can't waves. These aren't point source waves. These aren't infinitely small little tiny wave right here at the surface. That would be retarded to think so. Okay, so clearly the photon trajectory, the little bits are being scattered by electrons, and each little bit's going somewhere else. The photons are clearly being broken and then reconstructed. You're not making any counter argument to that, and you didn't answer the simple fucking question. You just did more dodging to another paper that says exactly what I just said. What basically concedes this point. Your own paper concedes these are the sources, and that there aren't two sources in the double slit. There are four sources. So you've just confirmed exactly what I have been saying, you stupid bastard. And you did it pretending Okay, that the evidence is on your side. No, the evidence is confirming everything I'm saying, and it's denying everything you're saying, shithead. So, anyway, let's play with it. I mean, it's just, you know, it's just these 4 videos in a row, whatever it is, on the double slit, going through all this stuff. You ask him a simple question, bullshit answer again. All right. The simple answer is, okay, here. Your question is, why is there no diffraction pattern in the double slit? No, there's no such thing as a diffraction pattern. I stated that. And I asked you a simple question. If you're going to apply Huygens in the single slit to explain why there's 2 waves, why are there not 4 waves in the double slit? You didn't answer the fucking question at all. The simple answer is there is diffraction in both slits. So this is just more horse shit. There's diffraction in both slits. Oh, well, so you're saying that each one of these slits is creating diffraction? A 2-slit pattern is coming out? I mean, a single slit pattern is actually coming out of each one of these slits? Well, then how did you combine them to make the composite pattern? How did you add them? And where did you add them from? Again, you're adding them from the surfaces. Why are the waves at the surfaces? It's the wrong location, retard. Okay. When you do the double slit, the interference pattern is dominating. Does it mean anything? The interference pattern is dominating. How does it dominate? You get a complete 0. No fucking light at all, you know, at 2 points. I'd say that's pretty dominating. So the envelope is dominating, jackass. But anyway, and you get the product of the 2. So completely refuting the cowboy then, because it's not the product. So, you know, they're refuting that. The product, you know, it's photon is there, and then there's no photon. That's their assertion, shithead. All right, diffraction and interference. So there's no, this is just such a pile of shit. So they've completely blown up the word diffraction. It doesn't mean diffraction anymore. I showed the image of the single slit with like 30 bars in it. It's not diffraction, retard. Okay. There are details on this page. So again, this page has absolutely no mention of Huygens and no mention of any of the crap he just said. It's not in the document. Okay, it's not there. This is just basically saying the math indicates that you have 4-point sources, and the fact is they're on the surfaces. They're not. There's no wave centers. There's no source that's a wave center. All right. And so that's just more horseshit. Yes, the N1, N2, N3 just means how many wavelengths away you're moving. And so this little pattern is created and it goes everywhere. And this big pattern, this loopy pattern, is, you know, spread across. And really all you're doing is saying, where did I reconstruct photons? And you have to reconstruct them inside of this envelope. And that's the rule. So the little bars end up inside the big bars, depending on, of course, the size of the opening. So if you use all the same sizes, then these 2 things will overlap and you'll get a minimal pattern. But most 2-slit experiments will inevitably create the common 2-slit fringed pattern. So anyway, but there's all this, again, they just keep linking to mathematics as if blah, 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 mathematics proves diffraction, blah, blah, blah. No, this is just identifying the variables. And again, when you analyze what they've done to the variables, they're doing exactly what I'm saying the truth is. So it completely confirms what I'm arguing for. There it is. That there's just 2 variables that matter. Okay, so in the 2-slit experiment, you can predict every outcome by merely understanding. So whether it's 1 slit or 2 slit or 10 slits, all you need to understand is that your point sources are the surfaces, and you're just deciding where the wavelength matches. And that's it. So when there's 4-point sources, you can obviously create more points where there's a wavelength match, and you'll get more light. And all you're doing really is just saying, so I could have 10 slits here. All you're doing is saying these 2 slits, okay, will have the same phase. These 2 can rebuild by phase. And then these two, if I had more, I could just go out further and further, and the closer they are, the bigger the bars. The further away they are, the smaller they get, and even smaller, and they're just stacked on top of each other, and all you're doing is adding the points where they're all in the same location. And as you get more and more slits where they're all on top of each other, it gets further and further away. So in a diffraction gradient that just has a bunch of lines in it, you end up with a blob, a blob, a blob, and a blob, separated by distance. And those are the points where every single one of these slits is in phase in this one line. And that line gets narrower and narrower the more slits. That's all. It's done. The mechanics are already revealed. Your waves are irrelevant. It's all just vectors from point sources. No waves required at all because nothing's interfering in any space. None of that crap is happening. You break photons and you remake photons. You can't remake them if they're out of phase. But again, we already went through these mathematical pages doing the integral. So this is just, again, you make the argument, they ignore your counter argument, and then just point you to the same thing you've already pointed out is exactly what I'm saying. So, I mean, it's, how is this a fair way to argue? I asked you a simple question, you wouldn't fucking answer it. So, fuck off. I'm done playing this game of bounce me to the same page I've already refuted. Go refute the Veritasium video. Go refute it. Okay? Go refute some of the evidence I've provided. But you can't and you won't because you're just a cheat. Alright, so enough of this shit. So I think I'll delete this question because it's really just, who fucking cares? Look, being a physicist just means being a mathematician, frankly. If you watch the lectures, it's all 90% math, 10% concept. Most of the drawings are squiggly little fucking mathematical symbols. They don't do any of this stuff. They don't draw any of the mechanics. And that's why the physics is wrong. It's because people don't understand. They don't even understand what the mathematical model is supposed to be representing. So that the whole page goes through the math, and it never really just points out that, yes, as you increase the distance this point sources have from each other, you make the bars narrower and narrower because the line, so to speak, that you're creating ends up being a much longer line that has much smaller markings on it. So that one line says the wavelength matches. The wavelength matches more often because you've made finer notches on the ruler. You're just lining up rulers. You're just saying you have two rulers. Yeah. So the whole thing is just, look, it's just saying you have two rulers. And so I put one ruler here and I put one ruler over here. And you can sort of understand, okay, they match. Okay, they got the same notches, and the notches match at this location. Alright, and then if I move it to some other location, that is, one of the rulers is this way, and the other ruler is, whatever, this way, however that works. Obviously, I have to make the ruler longer to make that work. So then I've changed the notches on the ruler. And so now the notches won't match up because one ruler is shorter than the other ruler. But you stretch the ruler. But the real catch is that what you're really doing isn't stretching a ruler, you're making more notches on the ruler. Or you're making smaller notches. And yes, there's no real easy way to explain that. But anyway, the longer the line's going, you can sort of understand that the more it matters. A little tiny change in this angle creates a big change on this surface the longer the line is. The tiny change here makes a big change here. And that's all you really have to understand. And so little tiny changes end up being a frequency. And so a wavelength difference. So the little notches get smaller and smaller and smaller. as I make this line longer and longer and longer, you know, going in one direction. One direction it gets shorter, one direction it gets longer. All right, now that's not the best way to say it either. And there's got to be a better way to explain this. I guess the distances. All right, so here's the distances. So you're saying this distance from the two outside surfaces is longer, and that means the notches are smaller. Now, there's got to be a way to say why that would be. So the notches are big when the distance is small, and the notches get smaller as the distance gets wider, the separation. So these notches are really small. Alright, so I don't know exactly how to explain that inverse relationship other than the longer line thing. It just means more notches, and that means you have the same wavelength, and then the same phase, and then out of phase, and then on phase, and then out of phase, and then on phase. So you have more opportunity to have a phase difference the wider these 2 point sources get, and the closer they get to being in the same place, the bigger, okay, the differences are smaller. Any difference isn't a big difference, and so therefore anywhere in here would be on phase, where to be on phase here, it's going to be a little tiny shred of a line. Yeah, I don't know. Alright, anyway, I'll have to think of some simple way to... the simple point is that this always holds true. The outside is dictating, so you have the pattern of the 2-slit. Okay, the offs here, the hard offs and the hard off. And you have the inside little bars. And obviously these humps just are intensity, how bright the light is. So the little bars are created by the outside surfaces, and this intensity is dictated by this contribution. This makes the humpy thing, and this makes the bars inside. And that always holds true, blah, 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 blah. The simple way of understanding. I mean, the thing I was looking for the last 7 years was that simple understanding that the outside surfaces are making the bars, the inside surface is making the envelope. And that's all you need to understand. Just not all, but I just mean it's key to understanding what's happening. Is that those two variables are controlling the pattern. I make the two outside. I make the openings bigger by moving the outside surfaces. I make the little bars smaller. I make them less bigger. I make them bigger and bigger and bigger until they're almost the same. If I make really infinitesimally small openings, then I make the two almost the same. The bars will be the same size as the envelope bar, and so I won't have much change in the pattern. I also won't have any light that gets there, so it won't matter much anyway. Anyway, okay, enough said. So, enough of the video, I think. I just, yeah, I don't know what to say. Look, game over. The last 4 or 5 videos, it's just game over. I mean, we've dissected the double slit. There's no waves. It's not a byproduct of a wave interference. It's just break the photons, and where do you remake them? Where do you put them back in phase? The pieces back in phase. That's it. Nothing else required.